Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to my studio. My name's Michael Markowsky, and today we are going to recreate another painting by another one of my favorite artists of all time. Today we are going to be painting Caspar David Friedrich's The Wanderer Above the Sea of Fog from 1818. One of the iconic paintings of the Romantic period and of all art history in general. So this is a monumental painting. I'm so excited to attempt this painting. And I've always been a big fan of Caspar David Friedrich's paintings. And we'll take a look at some of his other paintings. And yeah, this is going to be, I think it might appear to be pretty tricky, but compared to the painting we made yesterday, we made two paintings by Dr. Cynthia St. James, which, here's one of them. You know, a painting like this, I think some people would assume would be relatively straightforward and simple, but because of all of these flat colors, it actually makes things a little bit tricky, at least for me. I don't know about you guys. So we'll see if how people feel, whether a painting like this is more difficult than a painting like this. And then, so I want you at the very end to let me know which one, especially if you're painting along with me, which one you think turned out better, or which one you liked better, which one you found easier, regardless of whether or not you're painting along with me. Okay, so let's get right into this. There's a outline that I did of today's painting, which you can download for free and you can use to transfer onto the canvas. I'll show you how I did that in a moment. But of course you could just color it in with colored pencils or chalk or crayons, watercolors. You could transfer this onto watercolor paper and paint it with watercolor, or trace it and put it into your sketchbook. Lots of different ways of going about a painting like this today. So how do you find this particular image? Well, there's a Dropbox folder in the description below. Eventually, there we go. And you'll see all of these files in there. These are paintings that we've already done here. Tons and tons of artwork. You may recall Francisco Goya, who was another Romantic painter from the Romantic era. Again, he may or may not have been a Romantic guy, I don't know. Who's another Romantic era painter? I thought we did one. J.M.W. Turner, an example of a British Romantic artist, or English Romantic artist. And then we have here Caspar David Friedrich. And we go in here, there's 3 files. There is the original, and then 2 versions of the outline. One's a JPEG, one's a PDF, whatever's easier for you. There's also a private Facebook group just for people like yourself to upload your artwork after you're done, or even struggles as they're progressing. And I strongly encourage you to join the group and upload your version of today's painting or any other painting you're working on. Here's some artwork by Josh. That's awesome. So often, like, here's Richard. I challenged him to put up some paintings that he's been working on recently, and he did just that. And look at how cool these are. So once a month I go through all of the images and then give some feedback, and mostly just celebrate all the awesome artwork that you guys are making. Wow, these are so cool. And I thought, Richard, already, I mean, there was that other one with the cats. These are super cool. So we'll talk about that in January when we take a look at all the artwork you've been making. But I strongly encourage you to join the group and share the work you've been making. So we'll talk about Friedrich's biography in a moment. Let's get the painting started, and we'll come back and take a look at this artist. So to get this image onto the canvas, we want to use an outlining process. Now, I'm not sure what happened. I know I've recorded this, but I guess I just didn't upload the file here. So we'll take a look. It's the same with every painting. Here's a painting we just made a few days ago. This painting by Jacques-Louis David another person with a 3-word name. And what I'm just getting those pencils sharpened. And then what I do here is I'm going to transfer the outline onto a 9x12 sized canvas. And I print that. You can see here, if you want to get the exact one, there's some info in the description below. You can get the exact brand, make and model, which I think has worked really well over the past 180 paintings. And then you print out your outline onto a photocopy or piece of paper using an inkjet printer, laser jet printer, photocopier, lots of different methods. And then I'm going to tape it down. And then I'm just going to use this carbon paper to transfer the image. You can use graphite paper, 2-sided, 1-sided, it doesn't matter. This is just 1-sided carbon paper. You see one side's shiny, one side's matte. You put the shiny side down and do the hokey pokey and trace it all around. So again, this is not the image we're painting today, but it's pretty straightforward. Then you just go over top of all the lines with a pencil or pen. You can see let's come on, go back, there we are. So once you've got that, then you can just peel that off. I suggest taking a little look just to make sure all the lines that you want are actually there before you peel off the tape. And once you've done that, you're ready to go. And just in case you were wondering, oh, I think I saw at the end, you see how the video just ends there? So I think it's on another clip that I didn't load on. So anyway, once you've got that done, you've got your painting transferred onto the canvas. A lot of this stuff in the background is just going to be obliterated pretty quickly, so I just did a lot of the outlines on today's painting very, very quickly because, as you'll see, they won't last that long. Now, I'm going to do what I normally do for each painting, which is to apply a little bit of a colored ground onto the painting. And this is a typical process that artists have been using since the Renaissance period, and Friedrich would have been no different. He certainly wouldn't have used this yellow. The yellow that we're using is something that artists, most of the time artists would use a warm red or a rusty warm red. This just speeds up this whole process. Okay. And so the reason why I just brought this up on screen here is I thought, you know what, let's just see if we can see a little bit of that. You could see that there's some kind of color underneath this blue. Alright, it's probably a very subtle, and we can mostly see it in the edges between things. So it looks like it's some sort of light brown. Not exactly sure what. It could even be pretty close to what we're painting. Maybe this looks like there's a bit of a reddish hue. I would say it's probably a kind of a brown that is not too dissimilar from what we've got here. You know, if we just add a little bit of red and a little bit of blue to this, I think we would have exactly what he used as a background, or the Imprimatura, as the Italians called it, who were really the first to do this in any kind of organized fashion. I'm sure there were artists before who were doing a little bit of this in their studio in secret, but it wasn't really until the Renaissance in Italy when it sort of became codified as a standard practice. Okay, and as you know, I like to also get the edges. One thing I just love is when these paintings are all done, usually the yellow is invisible everywhere except on the edge. Or it's visible, just not consciously visible by most people. And then, you know, if they look at the side, they're like, why did you paint the side yellow? Or brown, or green, or red? You could paint it whatever color you want. You could say, well, that's sort of like how professional artists have been painting for 500 years. And people, really? Wow. Look how smart you are. Look at all the skills you've picked up over the past year. You're a real professional artist. And you go, yeah, kind of. Been taking some art classes on the internet, you know. Free, anybody can do it. Speaking of which, next week I'm rebooting the Intro to Painting classes on Tuesdays. So we're going to start out from ground zero. So if you've got someone in your life who admires your the fact that you've taken up a new hobby and you started painting, and they're like, yeah, I wish I could do that. I don't even know where to begin. You could say, hey, well, the guy that I've been taking classes with, he's starting it all over from scratch. I mean, you can watch the paintings, or the first lessons he did, just like I did. But now he's going to restart it and incorporate all of the things that he learned over the past year. And you could be right there on ground zero learning how it's done. So, how did I get this so wet? Let's just spilt that water underneath here. And there's Gareth says, Happy New Year, Michael. Hello, Gareth. And there's Paula says, nice to see Richard's paintings and artist sharing. Thanks, Deb, for posting them. Deborah says, Happy New Year, everyone. If you're watching this at some other point in the future, it's New Year's Eve. So, just in case you're wondering, wow, everyone's just really excited for New Year's. So, hopefully we'll be done with plenty of time to spare before New Year's. I don't think my wife would be happy if we went a little bit further than that, but okay, so let's just take a look at the biography of Caspar David Friedrich here, and then we're going to, as this dries, and then we'll launch into the painting itself. So Friedrich's born 1774, dies in 1840 at the age of 65, which, you know, is, I would say probably, you know, especially around that time, not uncommon, but there were certainly people who lived longer, and the majority of people lived shorter lives. As an artist, probably a little bit on the younger side. And Friedrich is known primarily as a German Romantic painter. And the Romantic era, Romanticism, was an art movement. We've talked about this a number of times, again with Goya and Turner, and there's probably a couple of other Romantic era artists we've talked about. But Romanticism was kind of a reaction to the very formal academic approach to not just painting, but also to literature and to music, which really were grounded in very classical ideas of how a painting should be made. Very rigid rules, really going back to the Romans and the Greeks for how to do it right. Right? So an example would be an artist who kind of exemplified the previous kind of generation would be the artist actually that we just skipped over there, Jacques-Louis David, right? Who is very focused on classicism and looking at the Romans and how they posed, like he was, you know, he tried to make paintings as if they were pulled out of the ruins of Pompeii, which he explored himself, right? Caspar David Friedrich and the Romantic painters, even though there's a little bit of an overlap, it's not a kind of clean break where all of a sudden everyone stopped painting in the classical tradition and everyone became Romantic artists, right? There's a little bit of a blurred line there, but artists like Friedrich, they felt like there was things inside them that they wanted to explore, rather than trying to achieve this quote-unquote objective, perfect, classical art. They wanted to start kind of thinking about, like, what is it that I'm thinking and feeling? when I look at things, what is my interpretation of things? And so really the Romantic artists were very inspiring to the artists that would come later on at the turn of the 19th and 20th century, all of the avant-garde artists who really started exploring what images could be beyond photography, which is sort of comes around, you know, in the mid to late 1800s here. So anyway, there's a fascination with nature as well, and a deep suspicion of technology and rationality. So what else do we want to talk about here? Let's go to a little bit of his biography. So he's born on the coast of the Baltic Sea in northern Germany, in an area that was known as Swedish Pomerania. I didn't know about Swedish Pomerania until now. And as a child, he witnessed which is not entirely uncommon. He was, I think, the sixth child of 10 children born to his parents. His father was a candle maker, and his mother and two of his sisters died, you know, when he was quite young, right? So he's 7 years old, and his mom dies the next year. One of his sister dies, Elizabeth, and then his second sister dies the next year, you know, maybe 5 or 6 years later. So there's kind of this trauma that's happening in the family that culminates when his brother Johann Christopher falls through the ice on a frozen lake and drowns. And there's sort of questions as to exactly what happened in that scenario. Was his brother actually trying to rescue Caspar David Friedrich, and he himself fell into the water, or was Caspar just standing on the shore? I mean, we'll obviously never know at this point. But I do think an incident like that would certainly cement in anyone both a certain fear and yet fascination with the power of nature to give and take, right? So he studies. It's also kind of interesting looking into his biography, because it's not clear, you know, his early beginnings as an artist, whether he was taught privately or whether the family was struggling for money. You know, it's possible that there was a little bit of both. Maybe there was a couple of years where the family had a little bit more money and had some private tutors teaching him, and then, you know, the candle business goes through a little bit of a downturn and they're struggling and they have to let the tutor go. Either way, he's interested in art from a relatively young age. He then attends the Academy of Copenhagen, which is now, you know, has become a very important fine art school in Denmark. You know, again, that part of the world has gone through many different sort of changes and eventually becomes its own country. But at this time, you know, it's, I think, all under the guise of Prussia, I think. I could be wrong. And while he's in school, probably as most artists would have done at that time, would be to learn by studying from the great the masters from ancient history. So what happened when they found a lot of those early Roman Greek and Roman ruins is that they would clean them off and then make literally hundreds of plaster casts of them, and they'd be sent to every corner of the world, mostly for art students to study from. And as I've mentioned before, when I was a student at the Royal College in London, I was staying with the head of the Royal Academy in London, and he took me around to see all of the rooms, often a lot of them that aren't being used anymore, and you can see like these gigantic plaster casts of Michelangelo's David, and which is not a Roman sculpture, but they're, you know, the winged, what is that, the famous sculpture that's on the top of the stairs at the Louvre Museum. Anyway, there's all of these things which are cast directly from the originals, are just sort of covered in blankets and sheets, sort of like a scene from Citizen Kane, just in these rooms that aren't being used anymore on campus. And a lot of the great art schools from around the world have rooms like that, because today not only are students not interested, but even a lot of the teachers aren't interested. I mean, I would be dragging those things out and making my students learn all that stuff. But anyway, so he moves to Dresden, where he basically spends the rest of his life. And when he gets there, he spends really the first maybe 5 or 6 years really exploring watercolor, woodcut printmaking, ink painting and drawing, and sort of starts dabbing his fingers into the oil painting thing, but it takes him a little bit of a while to get off in that direction. And you know, there's initially, you know, as many artists, there's a little bit of a learning curve, but we can see, you know, this is an early considered to be an early painting of his, even though at this time he would have been in his late 20s when he did this painting, this altarpiece. What else do I want to say here? I mean, I just think these paintings are so awesome. And again, we did not see paintings like this of like forests covered in fact, let's start looking at his work here. So let's go back up to the top here. We see some of his early paintings. One of his early teachers took him on walks, and they were doing drawing outside, which would have been pretty advanced. It would have been an advanced technique, but it would also have been very unusual, kind of avant-garde. That's a kind of a teacher that's sort of pushing the limits, because prior to that, artists didn't really look at nature for inspiration. It was, again, looking at how the Romans and the Greeks did things. And, you know, people didn't go on walks or hikes prior to the Romantic artists, right? Now, you know, I live here in Vancouver, and like one of the biggest things that people do in this area is go for weekend hikes into the mountains and the hills and into the forests, taking their dogs for walks. People did not do that 250 years ago. That was really, if you were to do that, you were a weirdo, right? And the Romantic artists are the people that opened our eyes, the Western world's eyes, to the beauty of nature. Right now, we just take it for granted that, yeah, of course, mountains are gorgeous. I want to buy a house that has a great view of the mountains or the ocean or the forest, right? 200 years ago, that would have been absurd. Why would you want to have such an ugly thing in like when you walk out the window, right? Because the idea is, with this, prior to the Romantics, with this rational control over nature. So we would have these very elaborate gardens, at Versailles, for instance, where everything is beautiful and manicured precisely. But no way on earth would you want to have any sort of part of the nature sort of showing in all of its, like, quote-unquote pure beauty. So we could see here, this is, you know, just around the time after he finishes school, and he starts painting these, like, really a focus on the landscape, and then imbuing the landscape with a certain kind of melancholic qualities of mystery, and that he, like all the other Romantic painters, kind of looked at nature as being representative of the chaotic feelings that we have within us, right? And so a lot of Friedrich's paintings and other Romantic artists, their paintings are sort of allegories for human emotions, and as well as trying to describe the sublime. And the sublime, which is a concept that really emerges around this time, is in its shortest, sort of most succinct way, is a both fascination with the beauty of nature or anything else. So there's something of being like in awe of like, wow, that is beautiful. But also simultaneously like an overwhelming sense of fear and like and existential crisis, right? So for instance, you know, a tsunami that's a giant wave and you're standing on the beach and you're like, wow, that is the most beautiful thing on earth and it's about to kill me. Whoa, I just can't, whoa, right? And so I mean, that's basically as kind of succinct as I can describe what the sublime experience is. And you know, someone might say, you know, if car accidents, you know, when you're driving by and you're doing that rubbernecking, like, whoa, that's like, oh God, that's, oh. Or when people watch, you know, movies with skateboarders falling and breaking their arms, or, you know, I would venture to say like there's a sublime quality to watching figure skating, right? Like ice figure skating, where, you know, you're like, oh, it's so beautiful, but I can't watch. I hope they don't fall. Like, oh my goodness, it's so like, oh, right? Like it makes me. My mother loves figure skating. It stresses me out because I just think like, oh, you just know something bad is about to happen. I think I'm stretching the definition of the sublime there, but I feel like that's sort of, I'm just trying to make it understandable for people. So, again, often in these landscapes by Friedrich, what we see is, you know, often one or two people surrounded by by gigantic mountains, huge trees and forests, right? So there's this idea of like humanity is just this little speck, like a little fly on the earth, and we are this insignificant part of this gigantic of nature, right? And again, that feeling of like, whoa, like looking out into space. You know, there's the telescope that launched just the other day, right? And it's like, wow, it's going to peer into galaxies that are as old as the Big Bang, and thinking like, wow, like that's incredible. It's also totally scary how gigantic and insignificant, how gigantic the universe is and how insignificant we are in relationship to it. Around this time, he gets married, and he has three children, I think. And many of his paintings tend to get a little bit lighter. This is one of my favorite paintings. I sort of did a reinterpretation of this for a record album cover that I designed years ago. So this is one of my favorite artworks of all time. And you can see there's also some Christian symbology that appears in some of these works as well. And we're getting closer and closer towards his death. I love this one, the Sea of Ice. It's pretty hard to see, but there's a boat being crunched by this ice. This is great too. A couple gazing at the moon. Okay, so is there anything else I wanted to share before we get going here? I think let's dive right into the painting, and then we can always come back and talk a little bit about some other things here. So, I don't know why this canvas got a little bit warped. So, one of the ways you could tell that you've got a relatively good quality canvas board is you can bend it like that usually there might be actually wood inside or super compressed cardboard. If you take like one of those ones from the dollar store and you try to do that, it's more than likely to actually bend or snap entirely. Okay, so how are we going to paint this painting? So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the background. We're just going to lay in a bunch of this color here, and then we'll do a pass on the foreground figures, and then we'll come back, finish the background, and then finish the foreground. So that might mean that we may probably paint over a bit of the outlines for this figure. So what I'm thinking about doing is probably starting by painting a little bit, mixing a darker color, and then painting that over top of my figure. So let's put some paint on here. I'm going to put my cool blue on there. And let me just think. I think I might do a bit of this mixing here. Let's put all my paint on the palette. I think I'll probably use almost all of the colors, I think, by the end of today's episode. So you can put them on your palette here. If you're new to the show and you wonder what colors I'm using, you can use the actual brand that I'm using. You can use these, or you can use any other brand of paint. The trick is to actually get the same colors, and every brand of paint makes the same colors. There is a video I've already done explaining what these colors are, but again, you could just wait till next week and then you could tune into the class as we begin anew. So those are my colors on there. Let's mix this up here. So I'm just going to mix a really dark color to get started. So I just took my warm red and my cool blue, and usually I use my cool yellow for this, but I just have this warm yellow left over, so it's making it just a little bit more of a reddish purple. That's okay, because we're not going to see this color. I just want to have something there so that it kind of might help me find the figure after it is potentially some of these edges get obscured by the blue of the sky that we'll put paint on here in a moment. So let's okay. So the goal here is just to do this very quickly. Okay. Alright, like I said, very quickly. And then let's just build this here, just a little bit of the... Actually, I kind of like this. I think, well, I wasn't planning on using this for anything other than the outlines, but now that we've done, it does make me think of potentially using it in the foreground here. Maybe, you know what? I think I might actually just take this color while I've got it. I might as well, otherwise it's just going to sit here and languish unused. I'm going to take it. Let's zoom back out maybe. And I'm just going to apply it down here. Now this is mostly a warmer, it's got a little bit of cooler elements, that cool blue. But we're going to paint darker colors over top of this later. And it's kind of got this bit of a brownish quality anyway. So now I've kind of lost a bunch of those rocks under there, but that's okay. I don't think anyone's going to be angry that we've got the rocks in the wrong place down here, right? We'll build all this structure out. In fact, maybe we just sort of just quickly... Okay. And the spam bots are spamming already. So, what are people's New Year's resolutions, since we're counting down to midnight tonight? I'm super interested to hear if someone's got some really interesting ideas of how they want to organize their time in the new year. Okay. I think Deborah and Richard had a really cool idea, which was to try to do something creative every day for the next year, which I think is great. The only thing I think I said is just if you don't manage to if you skip a day, it's okay, right? I mean, you want to try to keep up a resolution like that, but you can also don't be too hard on yourself because often people will, you know, want the day that they don't go to the gym, like, I screwed it up, there's no point in continuing, right? Okay, so let's take a look. Next, what I want to do is well, you know, I was going to just put this cool blue in, but now it's making me think maybe I should try to do a little bit of these mountains. There's two ways that we could go about doing this. Is that we could glaze, like we could put in a cool blue basically over top of everything, right? And then we could glaze in some of these mountains over top of that. That's my first instinct. The other way is to paint in a number of these shapes now, and then to glaze over top of them, which that should. We could do a little bit of that and just see how that works. The only thing is I'd just be afraid of putting on, of spending time and then covering it. because it's possible that the color we put over top of it could obscure the work that we do here. But yet, I think we'll do we'll alternate a little bit. I think we'll do a little bit of both today. Okay, so I'm thinking out loud here because there's so many different ways that we can approach a painting like this. So let's mix our background. Now our background is essentially just white. Let's take a bunch of this white. In fact, let's take a bit more. I think we'll use a lot of it. So we'll start off with this white. And then I'm going to take a little bit of blue. In fact, that's almost maybe a little much. So we'll just see. Okay, that's pretty good. I'm also going to use some matte medium here. There was a little build up there. So I'm going to take some matte medium. And this is going to just make it a little bit more transparent. So I maintain a little bit of this yellow. Because I painted that yellow there because I want that kind of glowing quality. Okay. Oops. This one here. So... I should have blow dried this whole thing. So let's just try to make sure all this is dry. Okay. So that works out pretty well just to get started. Okay. Oh, I forgot a little bit between the legs here underneath. there's going to be more layers on top of that. It's always easier if we're going to layer. I guess you didn't see what I was just doing there because it wasn't on the screen. But basically, there was some paint by these legs that smudged, and I just went and painted it there because if I'm going to layer paint on top of these, ideally it's layering on top of the same color. Otherwise, it's potentially, we might have one color here and the same color here, but under here it could be slightly different. And that would be kind of like, people like, oh, that's weird. What is something strange about his legs? Even if people aren't immediately aware of something happening there, it just might create like a, something sloppy or off about that painting. So we'll blow dry this here in a moment, and then we're going to start putting in some of these, the mountains. And again, we'll do that very lightly with we're just going to mix a little bit of blue into that color. So I'm going to mute this. So now I'm just gonna, let's see, let's take some white. We'll do this right in here. And actually, what I want to do next is create a dark color, because what we need is a gray here. So I'm going to take a little bit more of that red. We've taken our warm red and cool blue, basically the color like we used for here, but this time I'm just going to make it a little bit closer to the way I normally do, which is take some cool yellow. So we basically had a very muted purple, and by putting that cool yellow in, it dragged that color right into the middle of the color wheel to make our darkest possible color. So now we can mix this into any color, and we've got a bit of a grayish quality. Just gonna clean this brush off. Let's take a bit of that. This is just gonna help us get a slightly more grayish blue color. Okay. And then next, what I'm going to use is some satin glazing fluid or matte glazing liquid. Because I'm going to glaze into these areas here. Why am I using glazing fluid instead of more matte medium, which I just used for this? The matte medium will dry really quickly. Matte medium is basically just paint without any color in it. It's clear, but it, like most paint, it will dry, especially if you spread it out like this, it'll dry relatively quickly. Glazing fluid is very similar to matte medium in that it's also transparent and that it will dry transparent. The difference is that it has a little bit of a slow dry property, so it takes a little bit longer to dry, which is why it's very handy for painting because we can blend it out a little bit quite softly. So if I'm worried this is going to be a little bit, as soon as I mix a glaze like this, I often will try putting it in just an area where I'm more confident of needing to be a little bit darker. That way, like, see, this is, I can see, okay, that's going to be kind of dark. So we'll just put this in here. And then I'm going to use just another brush to kind of go along that edge and soften it out. Okay, let's do the same over here. Even though this is going to be a little bit darker and a bit more brown later on, I'm just going to put this in here anyway for these kind of cliff ridges. Same sort of thing. Okay, now that's pretty good for those areas, but now I want to lighten it up. I want it to be even thinner of a glaze. So let's just take some glazing fluid, put that off to the side. And I'm also just gonna wipe off the excess here. And let's get some of that color, a little bit, and just add mostly glaze back into it. Right, so you can see here's where it was before. That's almost maybe a little bit too subtle, so maybe let's just get a bit more pigment in here. I'm also going to take this, actually let's put a bit more, I'm just going to make a bigger batch here, so I'm taking my glazing fluid, let's make a bigger batch of this, still quite thin. Right, it looks very dark here, but when I paint it, like you can see, it's super transparent. So I'm going to take that, and then I'm going to kind of build up some cloud forms a little bit. This is actually the negative space behind some of these clouds. super subtle. We're going to do the opposite with some white shortly here. These little striations in the atmosphere, and as they get closer together, or as they get closer to the horizon, they're going to get closer together, right? Now that's very subtle. It's possible I might lose a little bit of this in the next step here, so let's blow dry that, and then we'll just see, because we're going to put some white into here a little bit. Okay. Okay. So I think, you know, I'm imagining we're going to lose a little bit of the detail we just put in there. But that's okay, because we're going to now glaze with white, and just probably going to be a little bit of back and forth, here for just a few minutes here, just to build up a really nice sense of atmosphere, of depth in this painting. So, in fact, I'm just thinking what I want to do. I'm going to mix really quickly a warm brown that I can start putting a little bit of here. That way I can just sort of do everything all at once here. So I'm going to take some of my warm yellow, warm red, and warm blue. Let's mix that up. This will ultimately be basically the color of much of the rocks in the foreground. That's cool. Okay, so let's where can I mix this? Let's do that maybe right here. Maybe let's just do it right in the middle. I should have just done this right here. So we're gonna take this warm brown, which now has some white in it. Do the same thing. We're going to take some glazing fluid. So this is just going to go in the foregroundish area here. Yeah, that might be enough for right now. I'm going to go back to my glaze, and I think I'm just going to darken it a second time here. I'm just going to do just a little bit more here. Do a bit more up in the sky. And then I'm going to do these, make these a little bit more visible than they were, because I'm about to lighten everything a little bit with some white, and I'm just afraid that some of that will disappear. I mean, you can see already it kind of has a lot of the qualities of the painting on the left, of the original. But we want to get even closer, right? Okay, and Lolly just joined us. Happy New Year, everyone from the UK. Is it officially midnight there in England? Let's see, what time is it in the world right now? Oh, it's half an hour past midnight in London. Oh, awesome. Let's get this back up here. Okay, so what I want to do... Lolly's already in the future in 2022. So I want to take this white and I'm going to glaze with a little bit of white. And glazing with white is always tricky because it's hard to tell the difference between what is white and what is the glazing fluid. So we kind of want to start out a little bit slow. Once again, we can go into the areas where we know it's fairly okay to be a little bit, to use this white. Right, like you can use your finger or your hand, and you're like, wow, that's actually pretty opaque. So let's look up here. I mean, just the other day when we did the Rene Magritte painting, The Great Family, we used, we basically, I sort of did a demo on painting clouds. So it's similar kind of thing here, right? I'm just using another brush just to kind of soften out the edges. Because unless you're painting kind of cartoon clouds are usually going to be a little bit fluffy and not quite so hard edged. Now I just looked up and I'm like, oh, I'm actually not really, these clouds are quite different than where he's put his. So I'm just obviously going to simplify things quite a lot here. So we're probably going to go back and add more of this deeper blue back into this in certain places to continue to shape things. Okay, now we're going to start coming back over top of these mountains here, and my glaze is very subtle. It's super thin, barely covering anything. But the benefit of that is I can do 10 layers of this until I'm super satisfied. I can just take my time, slowly building up more and more opacity. So we'll blow dry that. You know, I actually see that I'm actually being a little bit more subtle than he is, right? He's got more blue in the sky than I do, so maybe I'll put a little bit more. I'll add a little bit more, less of the gray, and just sort of put a little bit more light blue back into here. Okay, actually, you know what? Before I play with the sky a little more, I'll just let that dry. Let's do a bit more of the glazing in the foreground hills here. So I just took some of my darker, basically my black that I mixed, mixing this into the lighter color that I had here. I don't want to go too dark, but I'm just going to delicately put a bit of this in a few places here, just to... My brush is very dry. That, just doing a little bit of that in lieu of a lot more other glazing, but that just gives me this slightly nuanced, slightly different colors as a landscape often has, right? Okay, and I just want to get a little bit of this blue back here. So let's take a bit more of this cool blue and white. A lot of glazing fluid in there. I'm not sure if this is going to be too crazy. That might be, that's probably a lot of glazing fluid. Let's move this here. So this is just to dilute it, because I was like, yeah, that's going to be intense. So that's going to significantly reduce its intensity. So I'm going to kind of paint this where I put a lot of the white previously. Actually, I could probably pretty much just put this all over everything. In fact, let's just do that. Let's just sort of put it all over everything. This is a very thin color, but it is very, ever so slightly just giving a little bit more color back into the sky there. Now I am going kind of quickly, so I have blurred a little bit of what that warmer color that I just put down on here. So I could keep on doing a bunch of this. But I think, I mean, it's pretty close, and I actually think he's almost got a bit of warm blue. Maybe that's a cobalt blue that it's because it's got a bit of a purpley quality. So we'll see. Maybe we want to put a bit of that in the painting at some point. I don't think I would, but I just, as more and more I look at it, and this could just be my computer screen, but it does have his original's got a bit of purpley qualities in here. I mean, I could see you adding a little bit of purple, especially at the very top, as the sky seems to get closer to us. Like this sky back here is very far away, so we want that as cool as possible. But as it comes closer to us, it would be natural to have a little bit of purple here, but he's got a lot of that in the painting. But again, it could just be my eyes. Okay, so let's blow dry that. you know, I'm going to continue with a bit of this it's a little bit cooler blue, and just bits more. And I'm going to take a little bit of this darker color. Let's mix it in with a bit of this blue because I like that color. Continue this, even though this is going to get warmer down here, I might as well just put some down under here. Okay. Let's blow dry that. I think, yeah, let's do a quick blow dry. Then I'm going to add a little bit of darker areas on. Well, actually, let's start adding the white wisps on here. In fact, before we even do that, let's do just a bit more. So let's blow dry that. Where's my white? Let's get a bit of white back in here. And glazing fluid. We covered some of the cloud areas with a little bit of that blue, just to kind of get a little bit more of that cooler color into the sky. But now we're coming back, adding some of this white back on top of it. Let that dry. And then let's start coming back over top of some of these mountains. Give them the effect of disappearing into the fog. Okay. Let's continue down in here. So we're actually going to come back up on top of it. We'll paint this white, and then we'll actually darken very subtly back on the tips of the hills. So it's sort of a little bit, again, like a little back and forth, back and forth. Which we'll tackle all that here in a moment. So let's just see our darker color. Oops, that's pretty dark. did like that little bit of hint of extra dark. Let's get a bit more glazing fluid in there so it's not quite so opaque. And just wipe a little bit of that extra off the brush, and then I can come back. So some of that is going to get, it's going to disappear a little bit as we get a little more that foggy quality coming back over top of it. Just taking something a little bit darker. It's almost, that's a little bit too dark, but it's okay. Almost a bit too much gray that I put in here, so it could have been darker without so much white in there. That's okay. So what I'm gonna, I think I'm starting to get, I've got almost my background established. So I'm gonna take this warmer blue. We haven't used warm blue almost at all yet. I'm gonna take it here and mix that in. Let's get a bit of white onto it. Take our brown and mix that into this as well. Actually, let's put a bit of glazing fluid into it just to soften it up and also to make it easier to blend. So I hope it goes without saying that I'm like radically simplifying everything here. I'm not going to do all of the details on these cliffs and things. It's just to try to get the basics here. So let's, we're going to finish off the glazing of the white in the background. So I'm just testing on my hand, like, needs a little bit more glazing fluid. That's a little opaque, so. Much more transparent. So. Okay, all of these wisps and everything that he's got, that's going to take a little bit of extra time to do that. So let's, I think we'll build a little bit more down here before we, I should blow dry that. So before I go into the blow dryer, let's just finish off these clouds up here. just going over that, it just starts pushing that just a little bit further backwards. Okay, so let's blow dry again. Okay, so let's go down into the down here. Now I do think I should maybe go even a little bit darker on there just before I put a little bit of white, so again, I'll take my darker color, mix this into the gray, take a bit of brown, a little bit more black. Almost do a little bit of outlining here. So I want to leave a little bit of, like, I don't want this to be a solid horizon, right? Like there's light, the light appears to be coming from behind or in front of the figure, right? And that's going to create meaning that there's, just like on the figure, there's a little bit, see there's this kind of haloed edge around there, right? So I kind of want a little bit of that on some of these mountains. Like you could see this little pop of light on there. All right. I mean, Caspar David Friedrich is a master, absolute master at atmosphere. Like, arguably the best. So trying, you know, I'm doing my absolute best here under, like, while I'm racing to try to get the painting done. So it's even just getting anything in the vicinity for me is like an achievement. It's gonna take even more, just a little bit more. see, do I dare try to do any of these little trees? I think that is like a bit of a fool's errand, that I'll get caught up. Okay. Oh, maybe while I'm here, I want to do a little bit more of this blue. So this is my warm blue with some white and my dark gray color. Okay, so let's blow dry. Okay, so let's try to get clouds back into underneath here. So I want these sort of wispy clouds to be. This is going to take a few minutes to build this up. I mean, he's an this level of subtlety that he can get to create these like very moody landscapes is second to none. Like, I'm trying to think who. I mean, I guess the closest people that have ever come to that would be like the Hudson River School, like Thomas Cole and Bierstadt and I'm trying to think other landscape painters that. So let's blow dry that. Okay. Lolly says, I love it. It looks really cool with the dark warm blue now, like waves. Awesome. starting to look pretty good. Now, I'm not too concerned about getting these shapes in here so-called correct. It's just sort of approximating what's happening. Okay, I think almost just another coat of what we just did, and then I think we're done with the background. I'd be happy moving on, which, you know, it's taken us a while, but I'm sure it took them weeks to make this painting, so getting anywhere near in a couple of hours is pretty satisfying. Lolly asks, do you have a preference when painting landscapes or portraits, a certain style or something, or do you enjoy recreating all of these paintings equally? Good question. Good question. Whoops. First of all, I actually think this is not pure white that he's painting with. He's got a little bit of color in it. I'm using basically pure white and glaze, so it's not going to look exactly the same. He's able to get a lot more color in here. I could do a little, well, maybe, we'll see. I could do a little bit of, maybe I'll do this little bit here, and then I'll add a little bit of warm blue into this color. But to answer your question, I don't know. I think I like a balance of doing a little landscape painting and then doing a little bit of portraiture and figures and still lifes. Kind of trying to mix it up as often as possible, just to kind of keep myself interested, and also I know not everybody wants to learn everything that I'm doing, so I know that if I was just doing a bunch of landscapes, there'd be some people who'd be like, yeah, I don't want to do landscapes, I'd like to do portraiture, and just some people feel the exact opposite, right? And since I'm working on a comic book and I'm painting the whole thing, oops, for me. A lot of this is also kind of like research for my book, so, you know, doing a little bit of landscapes, it's like, oh, okay, this is, I can use some of what I learned here in my book, so. To answer your question, I don't know. I don't know if I have a preference, really. Let's come in here with just some actual white. Styles. I don't know. I obviously have a pretty diverse set of tastes, so oh, this rocks kind of comes down in here. Okay? Let's make sure we get some of this white in here. Okay, let's zoom out and just see where we're at this moment. Not bad. I mean, I'm pretty for. Well, we've probably been painting really only for about an hour and a half after I blab on at the beginning of every episode. Okay, so I'm going to start painting the rocks in the foreground and the figure. And before I just move on, I'm just going to clean all these brushes. You know, I was considering adding a little bit more blue into the foreground fog, but I think I just got to move on here. I mean, I'm pretty happy with the way it looks, so. Okay. I mean, I guess, Lolly, I would say paintings like this were, I mean, I'm just going to touch this up. Probably prior to teaching these classes, a painting like this would have terrified me. Because it is, you know, pretty complicated, but as time has sort of gone on, I've become painting a lot of these more classical paintings and using a very classical approach to them. It's been an awesome learning experience for me. I feel way more capable than I ever would have before attempting anything like this. So I think maybe when I began, I was thinking, yeah, you know, doing the Van Gogh paintings, those are going to be my favorite because I'm a huge Van Gogh fan. You know, a lot of the paintings from the turn of the century. Come on. Like, a lot of the avant-garde paintings, Matisse, Picasso, Van Gogh, Frida Kahlo, Emily Carr. That's generally where my interest has lied in terms of the artists I like the most. And there's been a lot of those artists, as you can imagine, since I'm choosing to recreate paintings by some of my favorite artists. But over time, I've found, like, I find it in many ways easier to paint some of these paintings than, again, like the painting we made yesterday, which is I would say, if you were asked 99 people on the or 100 people on the street, 99 of them would say a painting like this is easier than painting the painting I'm making right now. And I probably would have agreed a year ago. Now I feel like that is more complicated. And this, like yesterday, I was sweating it for periods of time. Here, I don't really feel that stressed out. I'm like, it's pretty straightforward. The technique is straightforward. Maybe it looks a little bit complicated, but it's I wouldn't say it's really overly complex. So I'm just little areas here that I want to touch up before I move on here. Because really, once I start putting the foreground shapes on here, going back into the background will become increasingly difficult. Okay, I think that's good enough. Okay, so now let's think about this next, the second phase, really, of today's episode. So I have a pretty clear idea of how I want to do the rocks. I'm probably going to paint that the brown back. Basically almost the same brown that I used before. Or actually, this was a different brown. That was the brown I used to outline. So probably a lighter brown, and then I'm going to mix a pretty dark blue, bluish brown over top of that. And for the figure, I might actually paint a bit of like a teal color first on his figure, and then paint a dark, very dark blue, almost the same, well, maybe it'll be a little bit more bluish on top. I think he probably would have painted it dark and then gone around and lightened the edges, but just in terms of the size that I have. So what should we do first? Let's do the rocks down here. And as I look at it, you can see there's some warm red in there. So let's mix our a dark brown, warm brown again. Let's see if, I think we're going to need a little bit more. So I'm going to start here mixing this together. So this is a very light color, but I think I might start with this, actually. That way I can kind of go right up to the edge, but not quite. So let's see, what this view here. Let's back out maybe a bit there. Okay. So let's try to get some of the rocky texture here. So that's his leg. So I'm changing the shape of the rock just a little bit, just based on how I blended, and maybe I need to cover up a little bit of, right? Because I really want it to go pretty much right up to. Now I think these rocks, I can see my line was right here. I think I might just put a little bit of this. I'm just gonna, all the paint, there's a bunch of paint still on my brush here, and rather than just wiping it off onto my cloth, might as well just. It's a nice warm color, and that is going to be nice underneath any... They're just going to help pull the whole mountain towards us. I was planning on just doing the outline, but since I got it and it's just going to go on a rag into the... which will eventually go into the garbage, might as well use that paint. It's not... I think personally, the more paint you build up, the nicer it will ultimately look. Lolly says, yeah, yesterday's painting was a lot more complex than it first seemed. And Paula says, this is a masterpiece. I love it. Yesterday I had trouble mixing the browns. Today I do much better. I love all the types of paintings that we do. I just have to catch up to your speed. Let's see. So that's where we are at this moment here. Yeah, well, let's mix the teal. I was gonna blow dry this, but you know what, might as well just keep moving forward here. So to get this teal, let's just take our cold blue and cold yellow. We get a green. Now we're not gonna just paint that in there, because we're gonna take a bunch of white and mix this into the color. Now right there, that's sort of like your winter green gum or something, right? Sorry, oops. Forgot to turn that on. So many different buttons and bobs going on around here that I often forget to turn some of them on. Let's go back here. Okay, so here's my kind of winter green color. So that's nice, but it's not really the color I want. I want something a little bit more teal-like. And here we go. Just added a bit more of the same blue back into here. And now it goes, I guess, from spearmint to... This is my winter mint, right? I'm thinking about some sort of gum flavor. Okay, so I'm basically going to paint this figure, or at least the jacket, with this color. So let's zoom right in. Yeah, we'll do this first. This is a big brush. So actually, let's use a smaller brush here. Why I'm going right to the big boy here. Well, it's not even a big boy, it's pretty small, but... You know, if you get confused, you can always refer back to the original. Or to my outline too, because sometimes it can be confusing scale-wise. Looking at the computer screen, you're like, okay, it looks great on the computer screen, but I just don't know how long these legs are. So having your outline around can really help. And I might need to widen some of these legs here in a moment, but we're just gonna keep going. His walking stick just became huge. Oops, oh well. Let's even do his collar, I guess, in this way. Okay, I think that's probably good. I mean, I can always do a little bit more. It's kind of hard sometimes doing, like, working from a silhouette. We'll mix it skin tone, which is basically I probably could have just used the exact same color that I put down here, except maybe adding just a little bit of white in there, I think. So I'm starting with a bit more of a yellowish color, just like when I down here began with this turquoise, this teal color, because we want that kind of bright gold yellow kind of off his face. Around the edges, right? And this is just a little bit of the deeper brown that I used earlier. Just wanted to fill in a few places here. Okay. Now let's zoom back out. He looks like he's got an umbrella instead of a cane, which could make sense. I mean, maybe he, you know, if you're smart and you're going for a hike, an umbrella is actually not a bad idea. Okay, so I'm gonna blow dry this. Okay, so let's we need a much darker brown. So I'm going to take a lot more warm blue. and mix this right into the brown. I think we're gonna need a lot more yellow. So we'll just mix this again. A bit more yellow back in here. I mean, that's also not too far off the color of his jacket. It makes me think maybe I should just use this right now. Yeah, I mean, it's... well, you know, this is... Yeah, that's kind of my jacket color. It's really dark blue, a little bit on the greeny brown side, but I think that's what I want. Because to make the brown that I want down here, I'm just going to add a little bit more red to this mixture. So again, this is just warm yellow, warm red, warm blue in here, and you can see different, like, all of these are just ratios of those three colors. So I think I'm just gonna... I wasn't planning on painting this just yet, but sometimes you mix the color and then the color tells you where you're gonna be painting next, right? Okay. So I'm not going to put this... I'm leaving little bits of area where there's the teal. And I'm going to also continue... I'm going to go over this again with another color shortly, but... Now, obviously, he spent a lot of time on the wrinkles of the fabric and all that kind of stuff. I just don't have the time to do that. He kind of looks like Tintin here. So I will use, I'll make another color that is much closer to my deepest black, and we'll put that in. So what I'm trying to do is get like the wrinkles and folds of his clothes here. And you can almost paint like right over top of the teal, and because it's, if you paint it kind of thinly, you'll still see it, especially when we do another layer over top here momentarily. So that's good for right now, I think. Okay. So, as I said, let's now take the same color. Maybe I'm just going to put a little blob. Well, I don't need quite that big of a blob. Let's now take a lot more red and mix this in here. We actually need to put a bit more of that blue back in. Really nice dark brown, and it's a different color than the one we had. Let's just actually use up all the rest of this red, get more blue, just so we got lots of this color pre-mixed. Zoom out a bit here. It's the same sort of thing. I'm going to leave a little halo here. And I'm using a small brush deliberately so that I can now start to build up some kind of architectural quality of all of these rocks. And this is an area where, if I have a lot of textured paint, could actually be kind of cool, because it would later on catch the light in particular ways, and rather than just looking like a big solid flat blob, you might see parts of like rocks kind of emerge and disappear depending on how the light hits it, and that could be really cool. I'm trying to modify going left and right and up and down, side to side, etc. Right, because this guy's got to have climbed up into this area somehow, right? So he had some sort of pathway to get up here, so we kind of want to hint at that through the way that we paint this. Otherwise, it's just going to look like he climbed up on top of this, you know, movie set, and it's just a flat shape. Well, it says, don't forget about his walking stick. I guess we could paint the walking stick this color, actually. Well, you know, maybe we should have painted it a little bit lighter. I'll go back to my... Painting is so big. It's a bit of an oversight. But, and I could have fixed that at the time, but... Okay, so while this is still wet, we can kind of play with it a little bit. We can add a little bit of the darker paint to it. In fact, I might even just take it right out of the tube. Or out of the tube, off of the palette there, and I'm just going to paint with it directly rather than mixing it in. What else? Maybe just take a little bit of lighter color, slightly lighter brown. Take my brown again. So I'm deliberately allowing it to get quite textured here, as I've mentioned a few times. This will almost disappear entirely. I mean, I could put a little bit of medium in here to make it kind of stay. It's kind of quite thick, but I don't know if I need to do that. But I could see some people doing it, and it could look kind of cool. He does use a little bit of white in here, so let's just take a bit of white to make a tiny bit of a gray. These are rocks, after all, right? And of course I can glaze as much as I want to darken or brighten any of this. Speaking of which, I might just... taking a smaller brush. And, you know, I've got all these little bits of the mountain, these rocks kind of showing through, so... for that light color, so I'm just now going in and making them look a little bit more jagged. So how about let's do the head and the hair here. We can use the brown that we've been using. I think just probably adding a bit of a glaze to it. Here's to get some glaze and fluid. Let's take some of this brown. A bit more yellow in there. Maybe a bit more red. Oh, no. basically just ended up back in the same place. Yeah. Right, nice kind of thin brown. And then we'll go what is that? A little dollop of water on there. Just wiped it away with a cloth with a little bit of water on there. Now this is tiny. A skin tone here. So let's I'm gonna take my yellow. I guess I don't have much red. Let's just mix that in here. And blue. Let's get more yellow. Let's take some white. And there's Heidi popping in to say Happy New Year. Happy New Year to you, Heidi, as well. I got a chance to say hi. Crazy time lately with deadlines, tech difficulties, and other issues. Wish everyone health, happiness, and lots of art in 2022. Awesome. Cool. Thank you, Heidi, for saying hello. Best wishes to you and your family as well. So I'm just going to continue doing this, the back of the head and the hair here. Maybe I need to blow dry that, get it a little bit darker. And obviously there's no reason why this figure has to be a white guy with blonde hair. It could be a space alien for all you want, right? It's up to you. It's your painting. Okay. I might get a little bit darker there in a bit, but let's go back to our the body. Basically, we're pretty close to being done. I really just want to kind of finish off his jacket a little bit. I could use a bit of black on the rocks potentially. This is his shirt collar here. Oops, definitely not that. A little too intense. That's pretty hard to do. To make it pop, I'll end up having to do a bunch of little bits of white. We'll play with it. But let's finish off this jacket. So the jacket, here is our green color we had before. We just want to add maybe more blue to it. Yeah. That's a sound, wasn't it? Like an elephant. What color do I have on here? You know, my turquoise, it's kind of intense. It's maybe a little too much. It's okay. Let's do the walking stick, and then we'll just zoom out. Maybe just a little bit more with this hair, potentially. Just gonna need to glaze with that. It's a little too intense. A little bit more subtlety, I think, is warranted here. I just heard my wife open the champagne bottle upstairs. Getting started early. We're about to get rocking up there. Her daughter's still asleep. My wife just finished work for the day, for the year. I think it's like, it is time to boogie down. I'm not sure if I want how much more I want to do on that hair. It looks pretty happy. I mean, we're super zoomed in. You know, when you're super zoomed in, things can look pretty rough. Okay, I need to blow dry that, and then, so let's just quickly do that. Take care of a bit of that little bald spot that had formed, and I was just wiping paint away. Pretty good. I mean, I'm pretty happy with everything. I'm just, now let's just actually take a zoom out. And see them side by side. I'm contemplating putting a little bit of a black wash down here. It's still a little wet. I think it would be nice just to darken this. So I think I'm just going to blow dry it again. Okay, so I'm gonna finish off with a bit of a black glaze. I'm gonna put a little bit of warm blue into it. So we'll take our black. We don't need much of it. We'll mix it into this blue just to give it we don't want it to be flat black, right? We want it to have a little bit of color. In fact, let's take a bit of the brown in here. And then let's put some glazing fluid in there. So just a bit more black. And now we'll go, oh wait, see look how dark that goes. So maybe I'll even use a smaller brush. So I'm going to use just a bit of a smaller brush for this. Just that way I don't lose my... It's not just a big blanket of color here. I want to sort of integrate it into things. And be kind of thoughtful where it's going to get dark, right? So this is great because we can really, you know, dial in and make a lot of nice nuance here with the rocks. I mean, that's turning out really nice because it's really, it's pulling everything closer to us. Remember, black is gonna come right to the surface. It wants to sit. If we're looking out a window, it's gonna go right onto the window. And then I can just take some pure black. I mean, I don't even know if this is coming up on screen at all because it's so dark, obviously. But that's sort of kind of the point, is we want to, with black, use it sparingly. Because just like the white, we want to build up to the darkness. and the white we build up to the lightness. I'm even going to take a bit of this color. It's my black, and just put it a bit in his jacket. That's pretty cool. Now there was a little bit of just before I wrap up, I'm thinking a few tiny little details. Just want to get a bit more of this brown. I guess the only color I didn't really use is my cool red, hey? Interesting. Just wanted to take a little, this is just make work, but let me see, is that in focus? Little bits of grass, kind of, there was some bits of them there. Okay. I think I can call it a day. I mean, obviously I could spend a little more time on the figure, but I actually kind of like that glow. In fact, let's just before we close up shop for the year, it does look like he's got an umbrella. I kind of like that. That's pretty funny. Yeah, for 3 hours of painting, I'm pretty happy with that. Okay, there's that. And let's just see him side by side all the way zoomed out. yeah, I think especially as this dries, some of this texture down here, we'll see. I'm not sure entirely I'm happy with it, but it probably won't be visible for the majority of people anyway. Cool. Okay. That's crazy. It feels so good to do these paintings, I'm telling you. Like, sometimes they turn out better than others. Certainly, you know, yesterday's left me a little disappointed because I felt like I did two paintings that weren't, neither one was great. Whereas if I had just done one painting, I never seemed to learn that lesson. If I had just done one painting, I probably would have done a much better job. And then so here, you know, 24 hours later, I feel like much more satisfied, much more like I was able to do something that is not only rising to my own level of ability, but also honoring the artist, right? It always kind of hurts a little bit when I feel like I didn't do the artist quite the justice that they deserve, especially a living artist. But anyway, that's a whole other thing. I see Paula just made a donation through the super chat. Thank you so much, Paula. I really appreciate your support over the years. If you would like to join Paula and make a donation, you can use the super chat function here in YouTube. You can use the PayPal link in the description below. If you want to send a check or e-transfer, you can contact me through the Facebook group or through my website. Those links are in the description below. Join the Facebook group. Take a picture of your painting, upload it to the Facebook group, and once a month I go through all of the images and give people feedback regardless of whether you're painting what I'm painting or something else that inspires you, and whether or not you've made a donation or not either, right? It's a great group of people who are super supportive, who've sort of been there, done that, and some people who've just begun. Literally, I just admitted someone just this morning, right? So, other than that, hit like, subscribe. If you're new to the channel, hit that notification bell, because sometimes I don't know until literally minutes before I go on the air that we're going to be live streaming. So if you hit that bell, then you'll be the first to know. Wow. Today was painting episode 178. I can't believe how much we've done just over the past year. I think over the past year, let me just take a moment just to do a quick little reflection here. Where were we a year ago? I think last year at this time we did was it Bob Ross on New Year's Eve? That seems to be taking forever to load. Oh, there we are, finally. Yeah, Bob Ross on New Year's Eve. And that was painting episode number 35. Or 34. So you could do the math. Did 140 painting episodes over the course of 365 days. So at least twice a week, which is, you know, every Tuesday and Thursday. And then there's a few weeks there where every day during the week I painted. So a lot of work got accomplished this year. This is really one of the main things that I devoted my attention to. I'm going to do that again this next year, and then we'll see what happens at the end of the year. But thank you, everyone, for joining me, for being with me through this journey. It's been a profound learning experience for myself. I hope that it's been helpful for any of those of you out there. And we'll see you guys next year. Tomorrow on Tuesday. It's my favorite joke of all time. Okay, everybody, enjoy the rest of your evening. If you're going out to party, please be safe. I'd like to see everyone back here in the new year, safe and sound. So don't drink and drive for everybody. Be careful, okay? We'll see you guys very soon. Have a wonderful New Year's, and we will see you in the new year. Good night, everybody. Oh, goodness.